All right, we're back. It's Grok Talk, or the podcast with no name, or we haven't actually named it because we're still sort of beta testing this whole thing all over again. This evening we have Anne Marie Banfield and Skip Murphy, and they're going to talk about a critical court case that's going on in New Hampshire regarding education and parental rights. And that's about pretty much all I have to say. You should listen to them now. Skip and Anne Marie, go ahead and have at it.
Will do. Well, thanks for listening, folks. We do appreciate your time, which is your most valuable asset. And Steve's right. Anne Marie and I went to the hearing for the Manchester School District, Jane Doe suing them over the fact that they decided to hide the fact that they were helping her child to social transition to being a male. Obviously, she was female, and the only way she found out about it is that the teacher happened to talk to her and slipped and used the wrong name, a name that the mother had never heard before. So they lied by omission. A very important point that I wish had been brought up during the hearing itself. So we were at the Supreme Court, 11 o'clock Thursday morning, and it basically had Rick Lehman, who was the lawyer for the plaintiff, versus a Megan Glynn, who was representing the school board. I think that Rick Lehman did a good job, given that he got about a minute and a half into his 15-minute arguments, and then the questions started coming through, and he didn't ever get the chance to say what he really wanted to say in trying to defend what he had started and what was covered in, as we haven't seen, but the briefs that were submitted by both the plaintiff and the defendant, all the legal documents, all the information that probably will make up most of the decision. But on the way home, Anne Marie going her way, me going my way, we had thoughts. And about halfway through, I said, we need to do a podcast over this, so this is why we're here. And thanks, Anne Marie, for coming on, and Steve for hosting us on the podcast. Yeah. So, Anne Marie, what was your takeaway?
I think that, for just a novice or just somebody who is watching the hearing take place, I have to say I left really not knowing what's going to come from the suit. Parental rights is on trial. We literally are going to just figure out, do we turn our kids over to the schools and we really check our rights at the door, or do those rights carry forward into the school, and where we have some level of respect and some level of the ability to parent our children? And unfortunately, I really don't have a clear indication as to how how they will rule. But it was just an interesting case to watch. It's very disturbing when you feel like parental rights is on trial and that we could possibly lose. And if that's the case, what's going to come from this? What rights do we have when our kids enter school? Right now, the question was about whether or not the school personnel can lie to parents. Essentially, that's what this boils down to. Do they have the right to lie to a parent if a parent questions something about their child? Now, in this case, it is a question about if your child decides to use a different gender or identify as a different gender at school. Obviously, a child can do that right now. The question boils down to, can the school personnel withhold that information from a parent if a parent asks? This is not about notification. This is not about, okay, your child came to school and now we have to notify all of the parents whose child comes to school acting out with a different gender identity. No, that's not what this is about. This is about if a parent goes in and says, is my child using a different name while they're at school? And the school policy says not to share that information with parents, that they should not share that information with parents. So essentially, we're setting up a school system that says that it's okay to lie to parents. Because quite frankly, if you can lie about this, what else can you lie about? I mean, if this is acceptable, then anything goes really, I mean, clearly this is going to open up Pandora's box. And how, at one point, do parents say, I no longer trust the school system? I mean, with that policy in place, I would never trust my kids in that school.
I think you're right. It really is a case of parental rights. How far do they go? And the lawyer for the district, Glenn, basically made that clear, that 80% of the week, parents can parent their kids any way that they want. And she explicitly talked about, do parental rights cross the schoolhouse gate? And it was clear from her arguments, and she made several straw man arguments now that I've listened to it twice, since I did capture the video. It's up on Granite Rock. It's clear that she believes, like school districts in a lot of parts of the country, that the kids are theirs, not the parents. And she even went to say, well, the parents have them for 80% of the time, meaning that we have them that remaining 20%. I said that right. 80% for parents, 20% for us. And it really is, thank you, it really is a disturbing argument that these people can actually say that. But Anne-Marie and Steve, none of us are surprised at this because this is happening all over. This is what has happened. Unfortunately, as you talked about, Anne-Marie, getting to that tipping point, we saw this in the Soviet Union, Communist China, the Eastern Bloc nations during the Cold War. We're seeing that, we saw it in some of the other places in Asia where communism had taken effect. This is chilling. And being a granddad who's raising his grandson, I'm not letting this go. In fact, somebody's going to get an email tomorrow morning asking that question again. I asked it to a principal, which got some of the policy changed in Guilford, and now I'm going to ask the teacher. And then I'm going to go for blood because I'm not putting up with this. But
that's rhetorical blood, by the way.
Political blood.
Political blood. That's a better description.
They want to play politics with my grandson. Congratulations, you've brought me upon yourselves. And they're going to find out first thing.
They should call the Guilford School Board before they do that.
Oh, I had an email conversation with the chair earlier this week about this particular place in our policy about lying to parents. They changed it. I sent her emails about the inconsistency in the language, and she said, we're not changing the language. We don't lie to parents. I'm about to find out again and deliver a lesson on my own. So that's one big reason why I went.
I mean, that is what the policy says. It says to keep this information from parents. So if a parent goes in and asks, then they're not they're told that they should not tell the parents. So you end up having to lie to them. And at a lot of teachers are not comfortable with this. And one thing that I don't think a lot of people know, Skip, and I know this parent who is suing the Manchester School District. That parent is also a public school teacher in another school district.
Yep.
So it goes to show you that public school teachers are not all thrilled with the policy that they have in place. It puts them in an extremely uncomfortable position. This teacher parent would not work in a district with this policy because clearly she doesn't agree with it. She's suing the Manchester School District over it. But at the same time, you're putting teachers in a very, very uncomfortable position. I personally would never work in a school district if I was a teacher that told me that I couldn't tell a parent the truth when it came to their children. Now, again, does it mean that the teachers are calling these parents and notifying them? Your child came in with a different name? No, that's not what the policy asks. Again, it simply says that, they're supposed to withhold this information from parents. So this is getting down to a situation where you're going to lose families. This parent/teacher removed her child from the school district after this happened. So you've lost a good family, a very good parent, a very good kid. You've lost the family, so they're no longer, for all these people who say they oppose school choice, well, guess what? She just exercised her school choice and pulled her kid out of there, and you're not getting the state funding anymore for this child. So you've lost out on funding. I hope it was worth it. And so you have families who are going to pull out from these schools. And we heard that at the parental rights hearing on SB 272. We had parents who got up and said, if this is what you're going to give us, if we do not have trust in our schools, we are going to pull our kids out. Other parents said that. So that's what's going to happen. And then you're going to get teachers who are going to be like, look, don't put me in this position. Now I have to lie to parents? Who wants to work in a school district like that unless you're a radical and you're okay with it?
You're absolutely correct. And the lawyer for the school board made it quite clear that there are alternatives that parents can take advantage of. Well, you can homeschool your child by taking them out of the district, and you can send them to private school. And I'm looking at this going, I couldn't afford to send my grandson to a private school right now. Between the two of us, we could probably homeschool him, but there'd be no time for Granite Rock. Steve's going, good, no more grammar checks, no more taking care of the featured images.
No, that's not it. But I did comment under your post, I think it was your post, that it sounded to me like, so school choice is a big issue, and the Democrats and the people who promote these policies to lie to parents are opposed to school choice. But then you have a lawyer coming out representing them saying, well, you should just go to a different school. Well, hello, which is it? If you remove school choice, we can't do that. So what exactly are you saying? It just drives me crazy.
Yeah, it's a double standard. And I want to say, Anne-Marie, to your point, the school districts aren't withholding parents, and I'm going to try to do a framing tactic that the lawyer did for the school district. They are lying to parents. No. The defendant lawyers tried to say, well, we're not lying to parents. She actually came out and said we're not lying to parents. But what she didn't add, and unfortunately Rick Lehman in his follow-up rebuttal didn't explain that lying has two ways of happening. One is by commission, in other words, outright lying. Well, what's the transgender status of my daughter? Oh, she's female. That would be an outright lie if they are helping to socially transition her to being a male. The other, which is, I think, a better way of putting it than withholding information, is lying by omission. In other words, we're lying to you by not giving you the information that we should. And that's really what this whole case is about as well, or another way of looking at it, is that you've got government officials, and make no mistake, school board members may be elected, but once they get elected, they are government. They are putting a governmental policy into place. The superintendent and the staff are implementing a government policy. And they are trying to find any escape hatches they can to deflect that what they know to be wrong is wrong. There was a discussion about the word should. Well, as I know from Guilford, this happened about part of the policy that says a transgender student has the right to be called by their personal pronouns and name, which if you translate it, comes down to, in this Dillon's Rule state, where does this subdivision of the state, the district, have the power granted to them to grant a new right to a minor child? That power in a Dillon's Rule state can only come from the legislature, which has passed a duly signed bill by the governor saying, oh, by the way, you can lie to parents by omission or commission. And that hasn't happened. And that was the basis of my lawsuit. And I'm very sorry that that definition of lying didn't come up by omission and or commission. I wish that Rick, who was my lawyer at the time, actually asked the question, what RSAs give you the power to do these things? Unfortunately, that's it. But I do dryly note, again, that the defendant's lawyer tried to put everything, well, the legislature hasn't done anything. It's supposed to be passing the parental rights bill. And thankfully, Rick said, upon a question by one of the justices, constitutional rights are never bound to legislature. And I'm misquoting here, but effectively that. They're not up to legislature. You cannot make a law that abridges a constitutional right, which the judges and the defendant's lawyer both agreed. Yeah, many times that has been settled. But the lawyer for the district tried to do it again near the end of her time, saying, well, the parent had the ability to go to the school board meetings and listen to the policies and make their voice heard about the policy before it was passed. She could have known about the policy. In other words, the lawyer was trying to say she's a dumb cough for not doing it. And if I knew what the lawyer was, who the defendant is, and I don't, it's just Jane Doe, but if I had heard that, I would have exploded. Because most people try to trust their government. And Anne Marie, as you said, and as I told my school board when my grandson's principal was asked that question, what is the transgender status of my legal son, which he is by adoption, she said, I can't tell you. And I took off after the school board. Look what you have just done, to your point, Anne Marie, of forcing your staff to lie to me. And I bet every single administrator surrounding this would have to do the same thing. How could I trust them? And worse, how can I trust you, my elected representatives? I think I'll stop before my blood pressure squirts through my ears.
Right. So I will say that the parents in this case, the plaintiff, has watched the court proceeding and was infuriated by what she heard. First of all, I probably should explain a few things about the parent because I think it's important for the listeners to know that this parent, again, is a teacher, but at the same time, I have spoken to her about her child. And I can assure you that from the very beginning, when I began speaking with this parent assured me, not because I asked, but by her own admission, that no matter what her daughter, no matter the journey that her daughter took, whether it be to transgender, to changing her gender or attempting to do that, or whether she came home and said, "Mom, I'm gay," or whatever the case may be, that parent made it very clear to me that she will love her daughter, that she accepts her daughter no matter what. And these are the kinds of parents that we are saying, no, we don't want you to know about your child. And then, you have the other side say, well, if the child's keeping information from the parent that says something about that relationship, well, I mean, come on. Anybody who's a parent knows that there are times where, kids are just going to, I don't think I want to tell my parent, or they're a little nervous, or they're, they don't realize that their parent is going to be nothing but supportive. And so this is the kind of parent that we're saying, no, you can't have information because you might be one of those abusive monsters. Well, this is not an abusive monster. This is a loving, caring parent, actually two parents, that love their child. And so there's no due process with this policy. There wasn't anything that says, okay, we're going to withhold information if you have a track record of abuse, or if we have reason to believe that there is going to be harm done to this child. I think that in those situations, at least you're including some kind of due process. Teachers get due process at school. Why can't parents get due process? There's been no attempt to rectify this policy to make it more parent friendly, to make sure that parents are involved. This policy is anti-parent. This policy is an attempt to put a barrier between a parent and a child, a good parent and a child, not a bad parent and a child. because then we do need somebody from the state to step in if this is an abusive situation. We certainly need that, and our school officials are mandatory reporters in those situations. So we have laws in place, and they know what their role is. And so, but in this policy, there is no due process. There is nothing to determine whether or not you are denying a parent their rights, even though they are good, loving parents. And that's the really scary part of all of this. They have passed a policy, and it originated from the New Hampshire School Boards Association, but even they've backed off of their recommendation. They no longer recommend this policy to schools. So why are they still using it? They're digging their heels in, and they're sending a message. Number one, you don't like it, get out of our school. Number two, we don't care about coming between you and your child, even if you're a good parent. We don't care. Because if they cared, they would put a due process clause in there. They would have something in there that says only applies to parents where there is a threat to that child, a valid threat or some kind of proof. But there's nothing in there. These are good parents that are being denied access to information. And, we have federal law that allows parents to examine their child's records. So if this isn't a record, so this is the sticky part. You are by law allowed to look at your child's records. So if they're adjusting those records, if they're changing those records, they're doing anything to those records, that could be a FERPA violation on the part of the school district. So parents need to pay close attention to that. But if they're not,
Anne-Marie,
Yep.
Explain what FERPA is.
So the FERPA law is the student privacy law. And there are different parts to that law, but within that law, it says that a parent has a right to examine their child's records. So if you want to see their behavior records, if you want to see their discipline records, if you want to see their academic records, you should be able to access all of that information. So the federal government has made sure that we can access this information because they know that a parent involved with their child's education is the best thing for them. And so to deny them that information would be a problem, obviously. But what about those parents who are abusive? What about those parents, if you bring home a bad grade, would a parent abuse them? I mean, we don't have a policy that denies parents that information. Parent can access all of their students' records, all their children's records. So it's important to understand that bond between a child and the parent should not be infringed upon. And the other thing is, I've looked at a lot of our ethical codes, ethical guidelines that counselors and child psychologists, and anytime you're doing research on a child, the code of ethics are very pro-parent. If you read them, who has access or who, it's all about bringing the parent into the discussion. If a child is having mental health issues, there's nothing better than bringing in the parent and working together with a counselor or with a mental health professional to get that child the best care that they can get. And that's really how a child succeeds in life. And to just have a blanket policy like that goes against their code of ethics. It's so anti-parent. It's so, it's a policy that comes between parent and child that it flies in the face of everything that we have seen in terms of how they should be dealing with children, especially in these situations. Because in this situation with this particular child, there were other things going on, and I'm not going to go in depth with what was going on, but they were really, to be quite honest, they were just basic kid things. The child was 12 years old, and while I'm not going to name the problems, they were just basic some kid things that a lot of kids go through, and having a good parent there to guide that child through those other issues is exactly what children need. And these parents are so caring and so loving. And this is exactly what this child needs. And she is thriving now. This child is thriving in a new school away from people who, do not trust the parents. And And they're there for her. They're there for their child. And this is a policy that tried to come between this family. And it just should not happen.
You're absolutely right. My daughter-in-law got her degree in special ed, and I was aghast when she told me that her professors told her, don't trust the parents. So this has been a long-seated process that's sweeping through the educational system, and you're absolutely right. They don't trust the parents. There is no due process, and of the 400-odd little story snippets that I put up on Granite Rock, just look up Stack of Stuff, and there's about 44 of posts up with about 5 to 10 snippets each. It's clear that parents don't care. I mean, teachers and staff don't care about the parents, and most of them that catch my eye are those that say, how do we get out from informing the parents at all? Time after time after time. Now, while there are a couple of teachers out in California who are suing their school board over this type of policy because they don't want to lie to their parents, there are other teachers that have hidden, like the Gay Straight Alliance type groups, under innocuous types of names, and then the kids come home and the parents go, what the heck is going on? And then they find out the hard way, like the story I've told a couple of times about that 12, 13-year-old girl down in Florida that had been bullied, was brought to a counselor, and looking around the counselor's office, saw all this transgender stuff, and it turned out that the counselor helped her socially transition, and then they found her trying to commit suicide in the bathroom. The parents weren't notified. The next day she tried it again. That's when the parents were called in. And I know that a lawsuit has been filed. I haven't heard anything of that yet. But that's the worst case kind of deal. Even as we're being told as parents, and I know there's one school board member, her name is Nicole Hogan, who is quite woke, continuously blathering that, oh, transgender kids suffer 4 to 5 times higher rates of suicide. Well, you know something? When you pit teachers who have no sociology degree, no psychology degree, no degree in counseling or certification against the parents, what do you think is going to happen? Yet we are the ones to blame. You know, the Trevor Project, who put out the original policy, JBAP, transgender nonconforming, or I think it's 100.1 in the Manchester school system, they're the ones responsible for this. And it happened like that, nationwide. It wasn't there, and then all of a sudden it was there. So this is an effort to radicalize the kids into this, create chaos within families, pit family members against each other. And when you're a young child, where else do you go? Where is your authority figure if you're not somebody who goes to church and has valued adults that they know that they can turn to? They're going to turn to teachers. And I will hold. That's part and parcel of the whole process. That is the long-term goal. And if you read what the Trevor Project has put out, indeed, that's it.
Yeah, and just think if they would have just taken the other approach with this parent, and just, especially since this parent is a teacher. I mean, in a very reasonable, logical, loving, and accepting parent. If they would have just, said, hey, here's what's going on. Let's talk. Let's all get together and talk about this. I think that the parent would have been great. I need your help at school. I'm gonna, here's what I'm gonna do at home, and let's work on behalf of my daughter. She's just struggling with some basic 12-year-old issues that, seem probably silly to adults, quite frankly, but they're very important to kids, and they're just basic kid issues, puberty issues that kids are going through, and let's work together to get her through this. And that kind of thing. And none of this would have blown up, but it blows up because they think that they can take over our role as parents.
They do, and in a lot of cases,
All right,
I think they are
minutes.
until something goes
horribly
wrong.
How much more you want to cover? Do we need more time? We can keep going.
Oh, I got 3 pages of single-spaced notes.
All right, we don't have that much time. Nobody's going to watch that. We could do a second one of these if you want, but
Yeah.
if you still have some really key stuff you want to get to before we break, let's do that now. If you want to save that, and we'll do a part 2.
Well, I'll end my part with this. It's obvious that the lawyer for the defense was trying to say that parental rights end at the school door. Yep. Then we take over, right along with the Maggie Hassan appointed judge Amy Messer, that made the original decision, is that we get the kids when they're in school and parents don't. This is dangerous, very dangerous, because no matter what happens in the school system, after 1 year, the set of teachers change, but the parents are going to stay there. And we're the ones that have to pick up this mess that the school has created. But they refuse to accept blame. They want the responsibility while the kids are there, sort of, not complete responsibility. But again, they believe we are the evil ones. And that's how this is proceeding. And I don't really want to wait the 2 to 4 months to hear what the decision is going to be. But, I already know that SB 272 here in New Hampshire, which is the Senate version of the Parental Rights Bill, there's going to be an issue because I know that already there are Republicans like Mike Boards, Travis O'Hara, David Nagel, and those are just 3 quick ones. There's a couple more here in Belknap County that have already voted against it in the past. They're probably going to do it again and torpedo it because of the only 4-seat majority that the Republicans have in the House, who gets to vote on the Senate bill now. Unfortunately, it comes down to, will the New Hampshire Supreme Court rightly decide this is a parental constitutional right, regardless of where the child is, regardless of what is going on, and absolutely regardless of whether that place happens to be a school or not. Parents are primary. Everybody else should be tertiary or quaternary or even lower.
Trying to with my microphone on. Anne Marie, anything else?
I guess I would just say that obviously this court case is big, and I'm hoping that we can get a positive outcome from it. But if not, we're going to continue to fight. I mean, I got a couple messages today from a couple people who are working against us, and they're not happy with what we are doing. But I made it very clear, we're not stopping. We're going to fight for these kids. There was a video that I posted on my own Facebook page of a girl that spoke before her school board recently, and she talked about how biological males are coming into the changing room. This isn't going anywhere, and they're changing in front of the girls, and they're really, this is an assault. This is assault on our girls, and we're not going anywhere. We're not stopping. This court case had to do with a particular provision in JBAB, but there's other provisions in JBAB that are just as equally offensive and assaulting to girls, like the bathroom policy, like the compelled speech with the pronouns, and like what's the other provision? Oh, the sports, that biological boys can play on sports. Many schools do not have JBAB policy in place. So your school does not need to have it. And I can tell you that we are not going to stop this fight. So just keep up the fight. You can contact us for more information, certainly, and we will help you in your school district.
Skip at granitegrok.com or editor at granitegrok.com or Steve at granitegrok.com. And yes, if you see examples in your child's school of stuff that's going on, like pictures and posters and leaflets and homework and handouts, send us a copy.
Yes.
We know what to do with it.
We do. All right. We'll plan to do a second one since Skip still has 3 pages of notes, but for now we're done. Thank you, Anne Marie Banfield. Thank you, Skip Murphy. And you guys have a great evening.
All right. Thanks.
I will try.